In the year 2022, an incredibly realistic virtual reality MMORPG game called Sword Art Online is launched. Using a kind of VR headset called the Nerve Gear, the players are completely immersed in the game with all of their 5 senses. As soon as it came out, Sword Art Online was sold out completely. Among those who were able to get a copy is a boy called Kirito. Putting on his Nerve Gear headset and lying on his bed, he dives into the world of the game, spawning on the first floor of a gigantic floating castle called Inkrad. While he's running around the place known as the Town of Beginnings, he is stopped by a red-haired man called Klein. Having seen how purposeful Kirito's actions are, Klein recognized he was one of the 1,000 beta testers for the game. The cheerful but respectful Klein asks Kirito to help him get the hang of the game, and Kirito agrees to teach him how to play. Under Kirito's guidance, Klein figures the game out and fights his first enemy, a boar. While he's struggling, he realizes that inside the game players don't feel any pain. While he was testing the game, Kirito played for a couple of months and reached floor 8. This time, he wants to get there in 1 month. During the testing, he felt more alive in Sword Art Online than in the real world, so now he's happy to be back. Until sunset, Kirito and Klein continue hanging out and enjoying the game. Klein gets hungry and prepares to leave, but he says he will return with some of his friends later. He wants Kirito to meet them, but when he sees him hesitating, he tells him he doesn't have to meet them if he doesn't want to. When Klein tries logging out, he notices there is no logout button in the main menu. Kirito checks his menu too, but he doesn't find a way to log out either. Since they can't move their real bodies to remove their helmets, there is no way for them to exit the game anymore. Suddenly, a church bell starts ringing and Kirito and Klein are teleported into a large arena together with all the other players. Distressed, the players are confused. In the sky, a creepy figure appears out of a blood-like substance. The figure introduces itself as the Game Master Akiko Kayaba and says that he is the only person who can control the game world right now. He explains that he removed the logout button on purpose and that nobody can leave the game by design. If someone shuts down or removes a player's nerve gear, the headset will emit a powerful microwave that will destroy the player's brain and end their life. Hearing all this, the players don't believe him, but Kirito thinks it's possible since the headset already uses microwaves to access the player's brain. Kayaba tells everyone that 2013 players have already died when their friends and families tried to remove their headsets, showing everyone news articles about it as proof. He also announces that there is no longer a method to revive someone within the game and that players whose health points drop to 0 will die in real life too. The only way of escaping the game is completing it by reaching the 100th floor of Aincrad and defeating the final boss. However, not even the beta testers have ever made it that high. When Kayaba says that all players have received a present from him, everyone checks their storage and finds a small handheld mirror inside. Suddenly, all the players start glowing and their avatars change to their real-life faces and bodies. Finally, Kayaba reveals that his goal has already been fulfilled. He wanted to create the world of Sword Art Online and then manipulate it as he pleases. Wishing the players luck, Kayaba disappears. Having been Kayaba's fan, Kirito knows that every single word he said is true. Left speechless, the players break the silence and suddenly start panicking and screaming for someone to help them. Kirito invites Klein to come with him, so they can make themselves as strong as possible in order to survive. Since the money and experience points they can earn is limited, Kirito wants to reach the next village before the other players do. Knowing all the paths from his time as a beta tester, he is certain the 2 of them can reach the village safely. However, Klein wants to join his real-life friends who are also stuck in the game now. After he thanks Kirito for his help, the 2 part ways. Afraid but determined to live on, Kirito runs through the fields as fast as he can, fighting wolves and other monsters that are in his way. A month later, 2,000 people have died in the game. However, not one player has yet managed to clear even the first floor. In a small amphitheater, Kirito attends a player meeting led by a charismatic man called Diabel. Diabel reveals that his party found the room where the floor boss resides and he wants everyone gathered to help him defeat it, to show everyone else that completing the game isn't impossible. The players listening cheer him on and agree to work with him. When Diabel tells everyone to divide into parties of 6, Kirito gets nervous since he didn't meet anyone except Klein ever since he entered the game. When everyone else forms their parties, Kirito notices a gloomy hooded girl is sitting alone. Approaching her, Kirito asks her to join his party and she agrees. Looking at her stats, Kirito sees that her name is Asuna. Suddenly, a rowdy guy called Kibao interrupts Diabel. He announces that any Sword Art Online beta testers present should apologize to everyone. As soon as the game started, most of the beta testers hurried to beat all the easy quests and hunt all the valuable beasts, so Kibao is furious at them. He wants them to get on their knees and give up all the items and money they gathered. A huge man called Egil comes out of the crowd and confronts Kibo, telling him that a guidebook full of the beta tester's knowledge was always available for free at the town's store. Defeated, Kibo gives up and sits down with the others. Continuing his speech, Diablo tells everyone more information about the boss you find out from the guidebook. The first floor's boss is called Ilfang the Kobold Lord, and he fights using an axe and a buckler. He is guarded by assistants called Ruined Kobold Sentinels, and once his health enters the red, he switches to a curved sword and his attack pattern changes too. After they agree to attack the boss the next morning, Diablo disbands the meeting. That night, while everyone drinks together, Kirito finds Asuna eating some bread in a secluded place. Trying to make friends with her, he introduces himself and gives her some cream, telling her bread is more delicious with it. Eating the bread with the cream, Asuna obviously enjoys it, but doesn't want to show it. The next day, the players, led by Diablo, travel through the forest towards the boss room. It turns out it's Asuna's first time at a party, and Kirito is concerned if she's got what it takes to fight with him. Entering a tower, everyone finds themselves in front of a large gate. Opening the gate, they find the gigantic Kobold Lord sitting on a throne. When he sees the players, he jumps in front of them and summons 3 Kobold Sentinels. While Diablo is giving them orders, most of the players fight the Kobold Lord, while Kirito and Asuna fight the Sentinels. Turning out to be incredibly strong, Asuna easily defeats all her enemies alongside Kirito. When the Kobold Lord is almost defeated, he changes weapons. However, Kirito notices his attack patterns have completely changed since the beta test too. Before Kirito can warn him, Diablo charges at the Kobold Lord, but gets cut down by him. Before he dies, Diablo admits he was a beta tester and makes Kirito promise he will help everyone defeat the boss. Inspired by Diablo's last wish, Kirito joins Asuna, and they charge at the Kobold Lord together. While she's fighting, Asuna's hood gets torn up and she is revealed to be a beautiful orange-haired girl. Soon, everyone else in the party gets their courage back and does the same. Running together at the boss, Kirito and Asuna strike at him at the same time, finally killing him. After the fight, everyone celebrates their victory. Having dealt the last strike to the boss, Kirito gains an item called the Coat of Midnight. Changing the pleasant atmosphere, Kibao raises his voice and accuses Kirito of being a beta tester because he knew the boss's attack patterns. He thinks Kirito let Diablo die on purpose. However, Kirito starts laughing and exclaims that beta testers are weaklings and that he was the strongest of them all. While he's bragging, the players accuse him of being both a beta tester and a cheater, a beater. Kirito equips his new Cloak of Midnight, and before he leaves, he disbands his party with Asuna and tells her she should join a guild with someone she trusts. 4 months later, Kirito has reached the 11th floor and he's drinking with a group of players he rescued. He's lying that he's only level 20 like them, but he's actually level 40 already. The grateful group of players invites Kirito into their guild called the Moonlit Black Cats. Their leader, a brown-haired player called Kita, wants Kirito to teach a shy girl called Sachi how to fight. Wanting to help the guild, Kirito agrees to join them and they're all overjoyed. A month later, the Moonlit Black Cats defeat a monster mantis on the 20th floor. Watching the Moonlit Black Cats, Kirito is proud of them. He feels guilty for hiding his level, which is already 48, while the others' levels are only 30. A few days later, Kirito sneaks out of his room and teleports to floor 28, the front lines where all the top players are at that moment. He comes across Klein and his guild. While Klein is happy to see him, Kirito is his usual gloomy self and walks away after barely talking to him. Teleporting back to floor 20, Kirito gets a message from Kita saying that Sachi has been missing. Concerned about Saki, Kirito uses a skill to locate her footprints. Following them, he finds Sachi curled up under a bridge. Seeing Kirito, Shizugashi runs away with her. She's depressed because she can't escape the game and there's no point in them being trapped inside of it. Consoling her, Kirito tells her she won't die because her guild is strong and he will protect her too. When he assures her they will certainly complete the game, she is so relieved she starts crying. That night, Saki visits Kirito in his room, telling him she can't sleep. Kirito lets her sleep in his bed, and before he falls asleep, he swears he will protect everyone. A month later, when the guild gathered enough money, Kita leaves to look for a house to buy for everyone. While they're waiting for him, everyone else decides to go to the 27th floor and hunt. There, they find a hidden door to a room with a treasure chest. Kirito tries warning the others not to open it, but he's too late and the chest turns out to be a trap. Suddenly, a huge number of goblins and stone golems appears in Kirito and the others. Teleportation crystals stop working. While they're desperately fighting the monsters, everyone except Kirito and Saki ends up dying to their overwhelming numbers. In the end, Avalon hits Saki too, killing her. Before she dies, she smiles and says something to Kirito. 6 months later, Kirito has reached the 49th floor. An information broker tells him that an event boss called Nicholas the Renegade will appear on the 35th floor on Christmas Eve, which is later that night. Kirito is interested in defeating Nicholas because there's a rumor that he drops an item that can revive the dead. However, he's aware that he will die if he tries taking him on alone. After he told him his whole guild was killed while he was away, Kita threw himself off Aincrad. Now Kirito feels like it's all his fault that the moonlit black cats have died. Arriving at the 35th floor, Kirito finds the exact spot where Nicholas is supposed to spawn. Suddenly, Klein and his guild teleports near him. Klein admits he has followed Kirito and advises him not to risk his life for a rumor. He suggests Kirito joins his guild so they can beat Nicholas together, but Kirito refuses, saying there's no point if he doesn't defeat him by himself. Suddenly, another guild teleports to them and surrounds them, having followed Klein. It turns out the guild is the Holy Dragon Alliance, a notorious group of players who would do anything to acquire a rare item. Klein tells Kirito to go find Nicholas, while his guild holds off the Holy Dragons and Kirito runs away. When Kirito finds the spot he is looking for, midnight strikes and Nicholas the Renegade, who looks like a demented-looking Santa Claus, appears. Having defeated Nicholas, Kirito returns to Klein with a hopeless look on his face. It turns out the revival item he was looking for is real, but it can be only used on someone 10 seconds after they died. Since Kirito has no use for it, he gives it to Klein. Seeing how hopeless Kirito is, Klein begs him to do his best to survive until the end, but Kirito simply walks away and wishes him farewell. When he returns to his room, Kirito suddenly gets a gift that says it's from Saki. Opening it, it turns out to be a timed message she recorded previously. Knowing he would blame himself when she inevitably dies, Saki recorded a message to tell Kirito he shouldn't feel bad. She confesses she saw his true level one night when he thought she was sleeping. When she saw how strong he was, she felt relieved because she thought he won't die easily. She tells him to reach the end of the game and find out why they were all trapped inside of it. At the end of the message, she sings a Christmas song for him and tells him she's glad to have met him. Kirito starts crying, realizing her last words to him were thank you. 2 months later, on the 35th floor, a party of players is arguing in a forest. A red-haired woman called Rosalia mocks a girl called Silica for being useless, causing her to leave the party. After a while, Silica ends up facing a group of powerful monkey-like monsters all alone. She has a lizard companion called Pina that can heal her a little bit, but the monkeys end up killing it and leaving her at low health. Suddenly, Kirito appears, defeats all the monkeys and rescues her. Crying over a feather left by Pina, Silica thanks Kirito for saving her. When Kirito sees that the feather is actually Pina's heart, he tells Silica that the dragon can be revived. On the 47th floor, there is a dungeon called the Hill of Memories where there is a flower that can revive a companion. Silica gets hopeful, but Kirito tells her a companion can only be revived 3 days after its death, and she is too weak to go to that floor. Feeling sorry for Silica, Kirito gives her powerful armor for free and offers to go with her. Thankful, Silica wonders why he would do so much to help her, and Kirito tells her that she looks like his little sister, making her laugh. When they arrive in a town, Silica comes across her former party members, but refuses to return to them. Rosalia mocks her once again and tells her she will never revive Pina, but Kirito stands up for her. When they stop at a tavern, Kirito tells Silica that many players completely change when they play an MMO, some even choosing to act as villains. He tells her that regular players have green indicators above their heads, while players who committed a crime have an orange indicator. The most evil players who have taken another player's life have a red indicator. Since Sword Art Online is a game where people's lives are on the line, Kirito is furious at those kinds of murderous players. Hearing this, Silica realizes Kirito is a good person, falls in love with him a little bit. That night, Kirito visits Silica in her room to tell her more about the 47th floor, but he suddenly notices someone listening to them. He runs out to the hallway to find the eavesdropper, but he's too late. The next day, Kirito and Silica teleport to the 47th floor, known as the Flower Garden. Silica realizes a lot of the players are couples and gets embarrassed. Heading down the path leading to the Hill of Memories, they are suddenly attacked by a man-eating plant. Silica is panicking, but once she calms down, it turns out she is a skilled swordswoman. Continuing their journey, the two fight various monstrous plants and level up. While they're traveling, Kirito tells Silica about his sister. The person he calls his sister is actually his cousin, even though she might not know that since they grew up together. When Kirito was 8 years old, their strict grandfather forced them to attend a kendo dojo. After 2 years, Kirito quit and his grandfather started abusing him because of it. When his sister told him she will put in enough effort for both of them, he stopped hitting Kirito. Since then, she continued working hard, but Kirito was always feeling bad about it, thinking she secretly hates him because of what happened. Consoling him, Silica is sure Kirito's sister wouldn't work so hard if she didn't love him. After a while, the two of them finally reach the top of the hill. There is a pedestal there from which a single white flower blooms when they approach it. Hopeful of reviving Pina, Silica picks the flower. On their way back, Kirito notices Roselia has been following them the entire time. Coming out of her hiding place, she tells Silica to hand over the flower. It turns out Kirito knows Roselia is the leader of a guild called Titan's Hand. That guild uses Thayer members with green indicators to find targets and lead them to Thayer members with orange indicators who then rob them. It turns out Roselia was in the guild with Silica only because she was looking for targets to rob. 10 days ago, Titan's Hand attacked a guild called the Silver Flags, causing Gevrion except their leader to get killed. The desperate guild leader then begged random people to avenge his guild and have Roselia arrested. Seeing him, Kirito decided to take the matter into his own hands. However, Roselia doesn't feel guilty at all, thinking there's no proof that killing someone in the game means they die in real life. Snapping her fingers, she summons 7 people from behind the surrounding trees prepared to attack. When they hear Silica telling Kirito to be careful, everyone realizes who he is. It turns out Kirito made himself famous as the Black Swordsman, one of the leading players who operates all by himself. However, Roselia urges her men to attack him anyway, and they do listen to her. They hit him numerous times until they're completely exhausted, but Kirito is unhurt. He reveals that his level is already 78 and his auto-regeneration skill is so strong that they can't drain his health before it regenerates. Taking out a teleportation crystal, Kirito announces that he will teleport them all to prison. When Roselia tells him he can't harm her because his indicator will turn orange if he does, he tells her he doesn't care, since he always fights solo. Back at the tavern, Kirito apologizes to Silica for using her to catch Roselia, but Silica tells him she still thinks he's a good person. Before he returns to the front lines, he tells her he wants them to become friends once they return to the real world, and Silica agrees with him. Silica then successfully revives Pina, grateful that she has met Kirito. A month later, Kirito reaches the 56th floor, which is the current front line where the top players are, including Klein and Asuna. While she was away from Kirito, Asuna became known as the Lightning Flash, the vice commander of the Knights of the Blood Oath, who are one of the top guilds. Another month later, Kirito has reached the 59th floor. While he's resting under a tree, Asuna wakes him up. She accuses him of slacking off while the others are advancing, but Kirito tells her the weather is too nice not to enjoy it. Before he falls asleep, he invites Asuna to lie down beside him. Waking up, Kirito sees Asuna sleeping near him, apparently having listened to his suggestion. At sunset, Asuna wakes up and realizes Kirito hasn't left her side while she was sleeping. She offers to buy him a meal in exchange for having watched over her. Even though he can harm another player inside a safe zone, such as a town, there were cases of players taking advantage of others. Malicious players would challenge a sleeping player to a duel and then use their finger to accept the challenge. After that, they would kill them in their sleep. In a town on the 57th floor, Kirito and Asuna eat together, and Asuna embarrassedly thanks him once again. Suddenly, they hear a scream. Running outside, they see a player hung with a rope out of a window and impaled by a spear, which should be impossible inside in town. Before they can reach him, he dies and disappears. Since it would be dangerous for everyone if someone found a way to kill a player inside of a safe zone, Kirito and Asuna decide to find out what happened. Looking for witnesses, they find a timid girl called Yoruko. She came to the plaza to meet up with a guildmate called Canes, but they got separated, and the next thing she knew, he was hanging out of a window. She also doesn't know anyone who'd want to kill Canes. After escorting Yoruko back to her room, Kirito and Asuna conclude they need to find someone with the appraisal skill who could tell them where the murder weapon came from. They decide to visit Kirito's item merchant friend who has that skill, so the two of them travel to the 50th floor to find him. While they're traveling there, Asuna tells Kirito he should stop being rude and call her by her name instead of referring to her with just you. When they arrive to their destination, the item merchant turns out to be Eagle from Diable's former party. Kirito and Asuna explain the situation to him, and he appraises the spear. He finds out it's a weapon called Guilty Thorn made by a player called Grimrock. The next day, the two visit Yoruko again and tell her a man called Grimrock created the spear that killed Canes. It turns out Grimrock was a member of the guild she was in, but she's surprised that he would kill Canes. She tells the story of her guild. We find out that Grimrock was actually Griselda's husband within the game, and they love each other very much. Since Yoruko, Canes, and a third man called Schmidt were the only ones who were against selling the ring, Yoruko thinks that Grimrock is after them and that he's responsible for Canes' murder. Scared for his safety, Yoruko wants to contact Schmidt, who is currently on the front lines as the leader of the Holy Dragon's defense forces. After a while, Kirito and Asuna bring Schmidt to Yoruko's room. Schmidt is nervous and paranoid, thinking Keynes was killed by the same person who killed Griselda. Suddenly, Yuriko loses her composure and starts screaming how the whole guild is at fault for not letting Griselda decide for herself what to do with the ring. However, Schmidt doesn't agree. He wonders why they are getting attacked now when the incident with the ring happened 6 months ago. Suddenly, Yuriko is stabbed from behind by a dagger and falls to her death. In the distance, Kirito sees a hooded assassin running away. Jumping out the window, he chases after him, but the mysterious man teleports himself away before Kirito can catch up. Returning to the inn, Kirito is faced with a terrified Schmidt, who saw that the hooded figure was wearing Griselda's robe and thinks it was her ghost. Kirito doesn't believe him, thinking there must be a logic to the murders. Later, while they're talking outside, Asuna gives Kirito a handmade sandwich, telling him it's going to disappear soon because its durability is low. When Kirito accidentally drops the sandwich, it receives enough damage to disappear. Suddenly, Kirito realizes the truth behind the 2 murder cases. On the 19th floor, Schmidt visits Griselda's grave and apologizes to her for letting her die. Suddenly, he hears a female voice and a hooded figure who looks like Griselda appears. When she asks him what he did to her, Schmidt admits that on the day it was decided to sell the ring, a note and a teleportation crystal appear in his storage. A male hooded figure then appears to listen to Schmidt's story. The note Schmidt received instructed him to bind the crystal to the room where Griselda was staying, and then put it into the guild's shared storage. He did that, but he didn't think it would cause Griselda's death, and he is now begging the hooded figures for forgiveness. The 2 figures take off their hoods, revealing themselves to be Yuriko and Keynes. Meanwhile, Kirito figured out that Yuriko and Keynes are still alive. He thinks that Keynes' armor was pierced by the spear, and once its durability was depleted and it disappeared, Keynes teleported away, making it seem like he died. As for Yuriko, he thinks the dagger was inside her the whole time they were talking, gradually draining her equipment's durability. When the armor disappeared, Yuriko teleported herself, performing the same trick as Keynes. Kirito also thinks Keynes was the hooded figure he saw running away and concludes that he and Yuriko wanted to make it seem like there was someone trying to avenge Griselda, so they can't draw out the person who actually killed her. Back on the 19th floor, Yuriko and Keynes talk to Schmidt and conclude he's innocent. Suddenly, someone stabs Schmidt with a dagger, paralyzing him. A group of hooded men appears, and Schmidt recognizes them as people from a guild of murderers called the Laughing Coffin. When one of the ominous men raises his axe to kill Schmidt, Kirito arrives and stops him. He tells the Laughing Coffins he has powerful reinforcements coming and prepares to fight, but the Laughing Coffins decide to fall back. After they leave, Yuriko apologizes to Kirito for deceiving him. Kirito arrived because he thought there was a possibility of the Laughing Coffin coming after Yuriko and the others. He was able to find them because Asuna had befriended Yuriko and she could see her location. Before all that, Asuna was talking about marriage to Kirito. She considers marriage in Sword Art Online romantic and practical because players who marry each other share their storage and nothing can be hidden. Kirito also finds out from her that if his spouse dies, the entire storage transfers to the other spouse. Talking about this, Asuna and Kirito realize that Grinrock could have hired someone to kill Griselda, so the ring automatically transfers to him upon her death. When Kirito tells all that to Schmidt and the others, they conclude that Grinrock hired the Laughing Coffins to murder Griselda, and then once again to murder the 3 of them once they gather in one place. At that moment, Asuna arrives together with Grinrock, whom she found in the vicinity. Completely devoid of guilt, Grinrock admits he killed Griselda. Grinrock and Griselda were actually married in the real world too, and she was a submissive and obedient wife to him. However, once they became stuck in Sword Art Online, she became confident and happy, while he was overcome with fear. Thinking the Griselda he loved was gone, Grinrock decided to kill her to remember her as she was before. Disgusted, Asuna tells him he didn't love her, he just wanted to possess her. Realizing she's right, Grinrock falls to his knees. Leaving Grinrock to Yuriko and the others, Kirito and Asuna say goodbye to them. Afterwards, Asuna asks Kirito how he would feel if he married someone and then discovered they had a side he didn't know about. Kirito answers that he would feel lucky because he could find something new to love about that person, and Asuna accepts his answer. Before they leave, they see the spirit of Griselda smiling at them. Asuna asks Kirito to add her as a friend, but he tells her he's a solo player. However, she doesn't give up and tells him to think about it while they eat together. 3 months later, Asuna visits a blacksmith called Liz on the 48th floor. When Asuna says it's her day off and she's meeting with someone, Liz concludes that she has a love interest and feels like it would be nice if she had someone she liked too. She continues working until Kirito shows Upan tells her he wants to buy the best sword she can make. He shows her the sword he is currently using and she recognizes it as the Elucidator, one of the best magic swords one can get from a monster drop. Showing Kirito the sword she considers the best she has ever made, he takes it and decides to test its durability. Contrary to his expectations, the sword ends up breaking on the Elucidator, making Liz furious at him. She tells him she can make a dozen swords better than the Elucidator if she had good enough materials and suggests he takes her with him to find them. A dragon residing on the 55th floor eats crystals, causing a kind of rare metal to form inside of his body. That metal is what Liz wants to make a sword of. Kirito dislikes working with others, but reluctantly invites Liz to help him identify and acquire that material. On the 55th floor, the two of them find themselves in the snowy mountains. When Liz complains she didn't know it was so cold there, Kirito gives her a coat, making her think he's nicer than she thought. Soon they find a huge deposit of crystals and wait for the dragon to arrive. Traumatized by his previous experiences with player parties, Kirito insists that Liz hides while he defeats the dragon. Suddenly, the gigantic dragon appears and Kirito fights it without much trouble. However, when Liz comes out of her hiding place, she gets caught up in one of the dragon's attacks and ends up falling into a deep pit. Kirito jumps after her, catches her in his arms, and breaks her fall. When Liz wakes up on the bottom of the abyss, Kirito gives her a health potion and drinks one himself. Trying to use her teleportation crystal, Liz finds out there's no way for them to leave the pit. The two end up spending the night in their sleeping bags. When Liz asks Kirito why he saved her, he tells her he would rather die with someone than let someone die. Touched by his response, she asks him to hold her hand, and the two fall asleep beside each other. Waking up in the morning, Liz finds Kirito digging a hole in the snow. Having found a piece of the metal they were looking for, he realizes they are actually in the dragon's nest. At that moment, the dragon returns. Acting quickly, Kirito grabs Liz, walks up the wall of the pit and jumps on the dragon's back. They fly out with the dragon, but he immediately shakes them off in midair. While they're falling, Kirito takes Liz's hand and she tells him she likes him. However, the wind is so strong he doesn't hear her at all. Telling him she said nothing, she happily hugs him. When they return to her shop, Liz takes the rare metal and makes it into a sword called Dark Repulsor. Trying it out, Kirito exclaims it's a good sword and asks her how much he owes her. Embarrassed, she tells him she doesn't need money, she only wants him to visit her every day to fix his equipment. Just before she confesses to him, Asuna storms in and hugs her. She was worried about Liz because she didn't know where she was for an entire day. Seeing how well they get along, Liz realizes Kirito is Asuna's love interest. She starts feeling sad, but quickly hides it and does her best to act normally. After she whispers to Asuna that she's rooting for her to get together with Kirito, she runs outside, saying she has to pick up some supplies. Realizing what's going on, Kirito follows her and finds her crying. Seeing him, Liz tells him to forget everything she said to him, but Kirito refuses. He thanks her for everything she did for him and tells her he's glad they both survived their adventure. Liz confesses that feeling the warmth of Kirito's hand was important to her because she finally found something real in the fake game world. She tells Kirito she'll be fine and that he should join Asuna and beat the game to free everyone. Kirito promises her he will do so, and she tells him to come by anytime he needs his equipment repaired. 4 months later, Kirito continues fighting alone on the front lines, reaching all the way to the 74th floor. Walking through a jungle, he comes across a white rabbit and kills it. When Kirito arrives at Eagle's item shop, Eagle is impressed he was able to hunt a ragout rabbit whose meat is an S-class rare item. Since Kirito has all the money he needs, he wants to eat the meat instead of selling it, but doesn't know anyone with a high cooking skill. Having heard the conversation, Asuna appears and tells Kirito she maxed out her cooking skill the previous week. The two make a deal. In exchange for Asuna preparing the meat, Kirito will share the meal with her. Since Kirito doesn't have any cooking equipment, Asuna invites him to replace. However, Eamon called Kirito tells her she shouldn't trust a beater like Kirito. Kirito is a bodyguard who the Knights of the Blood Oath assigned to Asuna, even though she doesn't want him. Knowing Kirito is a nice guy, Asuna tells Kirito to leave her alone. Leading him to the 61st floor, Asuna shows Kirito into her house and he notices it's very cozy and expensive. After Asuna makes a stew out of the rabbit meat, the two of them happily eat it. Getting serious, Asuna tells Kirito that since her guild reached the 70th floor, the monsters have started acting more and more unpredictably. She is worried that Kirito wouldn't be able to handle those kinds of monsters by himself, but Kirito is confident he can. Surprising Kirito, Asuna asks him to form a party with her again. Even though he is reluctant, she threatens him into it, leaving him no choice but to accept. The next day on the 74th floor, Kirito waits for Asuna to show up. Suddenly, she appears out of a portal in a hurry, falling directly on top of Kirito. Kirito appears after her, having chased her from her house. He has been observing her in the name of the guild for the last month, thinking Kirito is dangerous to her. When Kirito tries taking Asuna with him, Kirito stops him, saying he'll be responsible for her security since he's more capable than him. Getting angry, Kirito challenges him to a duel. While other players crowd around them, Kirito and Kirito clash. However, the fight ends quickly, since Kirito destroys Kirito's weapon with a single slash. When Kirito takes a dagger and charges at Kirito again, Asuna knocks the dagger from his hand. Kirito accuses Kirito of cheating, but Asuna gets fed up with him and fires him from his position as her bodyguard. After Kirito leaves, Asuna is concerned that she is too strict to her guild members, but Kirito tells her they wouldn't have come so far if it wasn't for her cheering her up. Visiting a dungeon on the 74th floor, Kirito and Asuna work together to fight monsters, making Kirito realize how much easier it is advancing with another strong player by his side. Going deeper inside, the two find the gate to the boss room. Deciding to peek inside, they open it and see a gigantic horned monster called the Gleam Eyes. When the boss notices them, they run away as fast as they can. Having gotten away, they realize the boss is exceptionally strong and start developing a strategy against him. While they're talking, Asuna asks Kirito why he never uses Dark Repulsor, the sword Liz made for him, but he doesn't have an answer. Changing the topic, Asuna instead decides to take a break and eat something. Excited about Asuna's handmade sandwich, Kirito happily eats it. Suddenly, Klein and his guild arrives. Klein is happy to see Kirito and he finally meets Asuna. Just as suddenly, another group of players arrives and it turns out it's the Aincrad Liberation Army, the guild that watches over the first floor and the town of beginnings. Exhausted, they sit down to rest and a lieutenant called Korvets approaches Kirito, asking him to share the map data of the boss's rune with him. Kirito gives the data to him but warns him the boss is too strong for his group. However, Korvets doesn't listen and takes his troops somewhere else. Sometime later, Asuna and Kirito hear screams from somewhere. Finding the source, they realize the army decided to fight Gleam Eyes after all. Kirito tells them to teleport away, but their crystals don't work in the room. Even though the players are getting beaten up badly, Korvets still insists they continue fighting the boss. However, he himself ends up getting killed. Seeing another player on the brink of death, Asuna, Kirito, and Klein attack Gleam Eyes to divert his attention. While Kirito and Asuna fight the monstrosity, Klein rescues the surviving players. However, even Kirito is no match for Gleam Eyes and he ends up staying on the defensive. Not wanting to see anyone else die, Kirito realizes he is forced to use his trump card. Taking out Dark Repulsor, he dual-wields it together with the Elucidator. He starts fiercely slashing Gleam Eyes with both swords, getting quicker and quicker until he finally defeats him. Before he falls to the ground with barely any health left, Asuna catches him. Having fainted, he wakes up with Asuna crying over him. She hugs him, relieved he's still alive. Kirito admits that he has a unique dual-wielding skill that showed up in his skill lists 6 months ago without explanation. He was hiding it because he was afraid other players would get jealous of him and start hating him even more than they already are. Still hugging him, Asuna tells Kirito she doesn't know what she would do if he died. She wants to take a break from her guild and continue being in a party with him. The next day, the leader of the Knights of the Blood Oath calls for Kirito. The leader introduces himself as Heathcliff and accuses Kirito of taking Asuna away from him, which is important because she is one of the guild's most important players. Heathcliff and Kirito end up making a deal. If Kirito wants to take Asuna, he will have to defeat Heathcliff in combat, but if he loses, he will have to join the Knights of the Blood Oath. The next day, at a coliseum on the 75th floor, a huge crowd gathers to watch the fight. Entering the arena, Kirito and Heathcliff set up the duel so that the one who first hits the other player wins. When the match begins, Kirito uses his full power to attack Heathcliff, but his shield turns out to be incredibly strong. At the moment when Kirito finally breaks Heathcliff's guard and raises his sword to cut him, time seems to stop and Heathcliff's shield somehow moves to block the attack. Attacking the confused Kirito, Heathcliff slashes him with his sword and wins the duel. The next day, Kirito keeps his promise and joins the Knights of the Blood Oath. Asuna apologizes to him for dragging him into all this, but he accepts his fate, saying he probably reached the limits of what a solo player can do anyway. When Asuna asks Kirito why he avoids people, even though he's such a nice person, Kirito tells her all about his experience with the moonlit black cats and how he still blames himself for their deaths. Hearing this, Asuna grabs Kirito's face and tells him she won't die like them because she will be the one who will protect him. The next day, the guild's forward commander called Godfrey invites Kirito to form a party with him and clear a dungeon on the 55th floor. Kirito doesn't feel like doing it, but Godfrey wants to evaluate his skills. Half an hour later, Kirito meets up with him outside. It turns out that Godfrey made Kirito join the party too, so he and Kirito can make up. Kirito immediately apologizes to Kirito, but there is something ominous about him. Arriving at the dungeon entrance, the mismatched party takes a rest together. However, that peaceful moment takes a dark turn when it turns out that Kirito put paralysis poison into Kirito's and Godfrey's water. While Kirito and Godfrey are no longer able to move, Kirito starts laughing maniacally and starts hitting Godfrey with his sword. After he ends Godfrey's life, he turns to Kirito and tells him it's his fault he had to kill Godfrey. He then reveals he is actually a part of the Laughing Coffin Guild. While Kirito is still unable to move, Kirito starts stabbing him, draining his health to a dangerously low level. Suddenly, Asuna appears and blows Kirito away. She heals Kirito, grateful she made it in time. When she saw that Godfrey's signal disappeared from the map, she thought there was something wrong and decided to come see what's going on. Approaching Kirito, Asuna starts attacking him rapidly until she makes him get on his knees and surrender. However, it turns out it was just an act and Kirito suddenly knocks Asuna's sword out of her hand. When he raises his sword to attack her, Kirito appears and blocks it, which results in him losing his hand. With his remaining hand, he uses his skill and pierces Kirito's chest, killing him. Seeing what happened, Asuna starts crying and apologizing, telling Kirito it's all her fault. When she says she should stay away from him, Kirito grabs her and kisses her, telling her his life belongs to her and that he wants to stay with her forever. Hearing this, Asuna promises to protect him forever too. Before they leave, Kirito tells her he wants to stay with her that night. Returning to Asuna's house, they eat together. After that, Asuna takes off her clothes, but Kirito gets nervous, telling her he actually just literally wanted to stay with her that night and not sleep with her. Getting furious, Asuna punches him with her full strength. Before they fall asleep, Asuna tells Kirito she wants them to leave the front lines for a while because she feels like something bad will happen if they return to the battlefield. Kirito agrees and tells her about a peaceful village on the 22nd floor where they can move to. He asks her to get married to him and Asuna enthusiastically accepts. The next day, the two of them request a temporary leave from the guild and Heathcliff allows it, but ominously tells them they will return to the battlefield before long. The next day, Kirito and Asuna move to the village on the 22nd floor, having bought a house surrounded by nature there. They even married somewhere along the line. In their peaceful home, the couple lives happily spending their days having fun together. One day, while they're walking deep inside a forest, Kirito and Asuna notice a strange little girl in white walking around. Suddenly, the girl collapses and Kirito hurries to help her. She doesn't seem to be an NPC, but Kirito can't see an indicator above her head, meaning she can't be a player either. Taking her to their house, Kirito and Asuna place her in a bed. The next morning, the girl really wakes up. However, she doesn't remember anything about herself, except that her name is Yu. Kirito and Asuna are friendly towards her and Yu starts calling her daddy and mommy. The two of them accept that and start acting as her parents, which makes Yu happy. When Yu falls asleep, Kirito and Asuna talk and decide to take care of her until her memories come back or they find her parents. The next day, the two of them take Yu to the first floor to try and make her remember something. However, she doesn't recognize anything, even though she should have started her game there like everyone else. While they're walking around, Asuna notices the town is unusually empty for some reason. Somewhere else, players from the Aincrad Liberation Army have cornered a nun and are trying to take away the children she is protecting so they can train them as soldiers. Hearing the nun's screams, Asuna takes out her sword and threatens the members of the army, making them run away in fear. Suddenly, Yu reaches out her hand towards the sky and suddenly starts screaming. Once she calms down, she's overcome with fear and faints. Having stayed overnight at the nun's church, Kirito, Asuna, and Yu wake up the next morning. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door. It turns out to be Yulir, the second in command in the Aincrad Liberation Army. However, she didn't arrive so she can complain about Asuna's behavior, but to thank her and ask her for a favor. It turns out that Thinker, the leader of the Aincrad Liberation Army, never wanted the guild to become as cruel as it is. At first, they wanted to share information and food evenly among as many players as possible, but once the guild grew too big, internal struggles started occurring. Kibao, who Kirito remembers from Diablo's party, ended up with a lot of power and started using the guild for his own benefit. After he sent all the best players in the guild to the front lines, where a lot of them died like corvettes, the rest of the guild is getting close to kicking him out. Deceiving Thinker, Kibao managed to trap him deep inside a high-level dungeon 3 days ago. Now, Yulir wants to save him, but her level is too low for and Kibao is preventing the other guild members to intervene. Recognizing Kirito and Asuna as powerful players, Yulir begs them to help her save Thinker, and the two decide to trust her. Since Yu doesn't want to stay at the church no matter what, they end up taking her with them too. Deep inside the dungeon, which is underneath the Town of Beginnings, Kirito and the others notice a safe zone with one player inside of it. Seeing Thinker in the distance, Yulir hurries towards him, but ends up triggering a trap that summons a powerful Grim Reaper-like monster. Realizing the Grim Reaper is probably as strong as some of the enemies on the 90th floor, Kirito tells Asuna to teleport with Yu and the others to safety. However, Asuna wants to fight with him and tells Yulir to take everyone to safety instead. The Grim Reaper turns out to be as strong as Kirito feared, and he easily knocks both Kirito and Asuna to the ground. Suddenly, Yu leaves the safe zone and stands in front of the Reaper. When the Reaper attacks her, his attack is blocked by an invisible shield and the words "Immortal Object" appear over Yu's head. She flies into the air and summons a powerful sword enveloped by fire. Leaping at the Reaper, she burns it to a crisp. Astonished, Kirito and Asuna approach Yu, who tells them she remembered everything. She tells them that the entirety of Sword Art Online is controlled by a single system called Cardinal, and that she is actually a part of that system. Apologizing to Kirito and Asuna for deceiving them, she admits that she is a prototype of a mental health counseling program that had the codename Yu. Even though she was designed to emulate emotion and put players at ease, Cardinal forbade her from interacting with any of the players ever since the game started. She had to monitor all the players' mental states but couldn't do anything to help them as she watched them despair and rage. However, one day she saw Kirito and Asuna, who were the only players feeling real joy and happiness. Even though it wasn't allowed for her to make contact with them, she did everything to get as close to them as she can, which ended with them finding her in the forest. Even though she's just a program, she has wanted to meet them ever since she saw them for the first time. Yu tells them she wants to stay with them forever, and Kirito and Asuna share her feelings. However, the safe zone they're in actually has a built-in administrator console connected to the system. Yu used it to delete the Grim Reaper, but now the system considers her a foreign object for disobeying Cardinal's orders. She tells Kirito and Asuna that she will be deleted soon and thanks them for everything. As she starts disappearing, Yu tells Kirito and Asuna to go and help other people in her place and share their happiness with them. When she completely disappears, Asuna is heartbroken. Kirito, however, gets furious and curses Kayaba, the game master. Using the administrator console, he accesses the system and isolates Yu's main program before it's deleted. He turns it into a tear-shaped game object representing Yu's heart. As they leave the town of beginnings, Kirito tells Asuna that even when the game ends, Yu won't disappear because he saved her data to his nerve gear. When they get back to the real world, they'll be able to recreate Yu's program. Considering Yu their first child, Asuna is hopeful she and Kirito will see her again someday.